after giving that lecture, and she was like, "Why are you trying to tell them I'm a nerd or something?" I was like, "I just knew you would know the answer." And they're like, "Well, they did ask me," so I was like, "Okay, there you go." So, what? No, I did. I thought it was class. It was important for them to know. You know. Like I was talking to Sammy here about indie rides that don't exist anymore. Maybe we have time. You did. I'm just starting here because I know you guys already have it, and give anybody who maybe missed the word or two a chance to go and do that. So, all right. So someone tell me what is conscription. What is conscription? Draft is another word for. What does that mean, though?
It's like they tell you to go to war if you're between certain ages.
Yeah, you're forced into drafted into the Army, Navy, Air Force, whatever. Although interestingly enough, in World War I we do not have an Air Force. It does not exist. In fact, we don't even really have what we would consider nowadays Marines. They do, but like it's weird because Marines, their purpose is for them to guard ships. So they're on ships. They don't quite serve the purpose we think of as being on forward reconnaissance types, things like that. That's sort of a later thing. Although they will certainly argue, no, from the beginning, but that's not what the objective is. But anyways, it doesn't matter. The point is that the armed forces look very, very different from World War I as things changed over. But anyhow, it was your force to join the military. Why did they do that? What was the purpose of the draft? But that's kind of a complicated question. Let me back up and ask you a more simpler question. Why was it necessary for us to force people into the military? Yes?
Because after the war was going on, people I think were going to die.
Yeah, it was a lot like, I don't really want to do this. So, and they needed people to replace people who were dying in the conflicts. Are a lot of people dying in conflicts? Yeah. So we need a lot more people. So basically, we're taking your choice away. It's no longer an army of volunteers. You're now in it because you're alive. Congratulations. That's the draft. Yes, question?
It's about the war that y'all did on Friday.
Yes.
Do I get posted on first?
No. As long as it's there, I don't care. That's what you did. See how easy is that? So anyways, so we have all these folks coming in and conscription thing, and eventually we have to expand it, because at first it's just men 18 to 41, then we have to include married men, and then those ages start kind of going out. Now technically, you had to be a certain age to join the military. I believe that was 16. People lie about it all the time, though, because to be perfectly honest, if you're desperate and you're a military recruiter, and someone says, hey, I want to join, you're not going to look too hard at them in terms of their age. You know? It also depends on like what people actually look like, but they did turn people down. There were certain requirements depending on, like, say, if you were blind, that's in the military, or you had other physical ailments. But there was a lot of issues in terms of like the requirements, and basically recruiters ignoring them because they were desperate for people. Now this has another effect. All these guys going to war, what happens? Politically speaking. Right, because women are the only ones still around, kind of. And that's not exactly true. There's still plenty of men back home. But it was really heavily discouraged in many countries for you to be a healthy, fit guy and go to war, or to not go to war. You might remember I showed you guys a number of weeks ago an episode of the TV show Downton Abbey. And there was one scene where they're in this concert that's trying to raise money for the troops, and this woman shows a guy and gives one of the guys a white feather and says, "You're a coward." You guys remember that at all? Did you see that part? You guys should have seen that. Anyways, all right, so going back to Downton Abbey. So basically what happens in this scene is that there's a guy who really, really wants to go fight a war, but he's literally the only child that this guy has. And so basically his father refuses to allow him to go join the army. Which seems really weird. Why doesn't he just do it anyways? He could, but that would basically cut him ties with his family. That's not really easy to do. So basically he is stuck, and he laments that he can't go fight while everybody else is doing. He feels like a coward because of it. Meanwhile, he's a servant at this big house, and this house is going to be turned into a hospital for the resuscitation of officers who were injured during the war. And to raise money for this, they hold this like kind of ball, this kind of like music concert type thing. So, well, people come and basically give money to the troops, that sort of thing. While there's a group of women who end up handing this guy a white feather. The white feather was used by the government to basically publicly shame people who wouldn't join the war efforts. Public shaming was very much a useful tool to try to get people to engage in the war. And white feather was seen as a sign of cowardice. And so this in the TV show makes this guy feel really, really guilty. He's very upset, and there's all this stuff going on. But absolutely was something that happened, and women were paid by the government to go in gaggles and publicly shame guys so they would join the war. What was kind of ironic is they basically were supposed to target guys who were out of uniform. If you were in uniform, it was all good. But if you were out of uniform, then you would get this public shaming. What's weird is when guys returned to London places on leave, basically they're in the army, they get a break, they get a vacation while the war's still going on. They go home and get some rest and relaxation. They'd be hanging out in just their regular clothes, and women would approach them and call them cowards for not joining the military. There's this one story of this guy in France who they presented a white feather to, and he said, "Oh, I'll just put it next to this," and he had on the Croix de Guerre, which is this medal that's given for gallantry in the face of terrible odds in combat. It's like the French equivalent to the Congressional Medal of Honor, only the highest of the high are ever considered for that award. It's like, if you get that one, it's like, holy crap. It's to such a point that if you have the Congressional Medal of Honor, it doesn't matter what rank somebody is above you, they still salute you. Like, that's the level of respect this thing gets. So he's like, I'm just going to put this thick symbol of cowardice right next to my, Medal of Honor, and just kind of carry it around. And the thing is, he got multiple ones. There's another guy who, I forget what he said, but there was something to the effect that he was going to put it with his leg that he lost, or something like that, because he lost a leg in the Somme. And so basically, it was kind of a terrible thing, culturally at the point. And they specifically used young, pretty women because it would be even more shaming for the guys. So this was something that was very much going on. They were absolutely desperate for people, and so they used all these kind of various contrivances to drum up support for the war effort. Not to mention money. We're going to get, you guys know what this is, by the way? Picture of? Yeah, they're in the trench. They're coming out, and they have a soccer ball.
Oh, Christmas trees.
You got it.
Hey, what?
It's the Christmas truce. We talked about that. We talked about the Zeppelins and what they were doing here. Do you guys remember why they were using Zeppelins to bomb civilians? Partially, you're right, yeah. But why civilians? Because they're not...
Oh. They tied up something because they're the...
It's to cause fear, right? Cause terror. Our objective is to win the war. Battles are all well and good, but we want to win the war. How do you win a war? What? Yeah, but specifically, I win by making you give up. Think about it that way. No war has ever ended otherwise. Every single war ends with somebody surrendering. There's never been a war, to our knowledge, of one side being this every single person murdered. You know what I mean? That's complete genocide. Kind of like what Hitler tried to do. Not cool, man. That generally doesn't happen. Never happens. So, how do we get them to surrender? How do we get people to give up?
Fear.
Fear is an effective means. If we bring the war to your doorstep, we attack you, you're more likely to freak out and want to stop. You want this to end. By the way, what did Al-Qaeda do with 9/11 and all this kind of same thing? It's terrorism is what it is. And it's effective. Maybe not that, hey, we gave up and we surrendered, we're not fighting Al-Qaeda anymore. That kind of was an epic fail in that regards. But what it did do is it made us spend a fortune on new security measures and updating all kinds of communications things, giving away rights of privacy, stuff like that. Like, it had this huge economic impact for really a very low cost on their end. So it was an effective attack in a certain point of view. The Zeppelins attacking the southern part of England was all about this. It was to cause fear. And one of the big things we have to understand about the war is that war is psychological as much as anything. Support for the war, it's hard to keep people interested in keeping a war going. At first you have this fervor, yeah, we're going to get revenge, and it's the freaking dirty Huns and all this great stuff. But as time wears on, as we start losing our loved ones in the conflict, as we start losing people, we start wanting the war to come to an end. We're putting pressure on our government saying, you need to find a solution to end this conflict. And so, as time goes on, we have all this stuff spreading around, information in the media that's trying to get us to support the war effort. The government puts out advertisements to try to convince us that the war is necessary. Okay? This is propaganda. It's a form of media that's aimed specifically at making up your mind about something, to put something in a specific light so you agree with whatever it is that they're trying to say. Okay? Now, nowadays, there's so much media out there, it's unbelievable. I mean, if you think about it, these little things we carry around are amazing devices of media that really, people overestimate, or underestimate how significant they are. I mean, you're constantly plugged in to information through the internet, through Netflix, YouTube, through social media websites, Tumblr, whatever. You have this constant influx of information. And the thing of it is, people who produce media always have something in mind that they're trying to convince you of. It's all about how they present the material. This is true of historians as well. Great example, police shootings. Okay? If you go on YouTube, someone did an experiment where they took 2 videos of the same incidents. Basically what happened is a suspect was shot by the police and killed. He died on the scene. It was in front of like a 7-Eleven type thing. From one police view, what you see is this guy standing, he looks around, starts running, and gets shot like 30 times by police. So this guy took this video and showed people and said, was this shooting justified? And people were outraged. Like, how those police should all be arrested, this was murder, all this kind of stuff. The second video shows a little bit more time before that. What had happened, this guy had a gun and was pointing at police, and they kept saying, put the gun down, put the gun down. 3 different times they tried to approach him, and they pointed the gun, they backed up, sort of thing like that. Then he started running and pointing the gun at these kids who were off screen, so they dropped him because they didn't know if he was going to go kill these kids or not. So again, was this shooting justified? They're like, yeah, absolutely it was justified. He was about to go kill those kids over there. So, they had to do what they had to do. It was our decision, they had to do it. It's all about how this one scenario was shown. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's how propaganda changes our opinions on things. Does that make sense? Now, in the early 20th century, there wasn't near as much media out there. Radio was not widely spread. We really didn't have a lot of means of communicating. We had newspapers. We had cinema. Cinema was a big deal at the turn of the 20th century. And then we had posters that would put up, signs that people see on the streets, things like that. That's pretty much it. Also music, popular music and things like that. There's a song that's kind of famous from this era in America called Over There, which basically is this rousing musical number that's trying to say, yeah, we're going to win the war and stuff like this. But all these poster mache are examples of propaganda posters that were around during the turn of the 20th century. This one was showing the Zeppelin bombings I was talking about, and basically, I don't know if you guys are noticing, this is actually German. And basically, it was trying to say, it's like, no, they can't stop us. You guys are unstoppable, I think, like that. He was encouraging this sense of strength. This, of course, is the U.S. one, Halt the Hun. Again, what's going on in this picture? You guys see? Yeah, you got this woman with a baby, and the soldier's like, I'm gonna do terrible things. I got this big pointy sword thing. And this dude's like, no! Out of my house! He's literally like rejecting this guy by the throat. Another thing that's kind of interesting is look at the size comparison. Like, you got this little bitty, so she's like way smaller. If she stands up, she's gonna be like this tall on this dude, right? And then you got this guy who's like moving over her, but this American dude, he's got a sword in one hand, and he's just kind of like grabbing this dude, and he's like huge by comparison. So it's, again, it's like to make you feel strong. You go out here and stop the Germans. Here's two more. On the left-hand side, we've got an example of another American one, U.S. Army enlist, destroy the bad group. The other two would be King Kong. Yeah, totally, right? This is totally a rip-off of that sort of, not really King Kong specifically, but this kind of like Mad Hate kind of scenario, because King Kong wasn't original, that's been around for a while. But then you got this lady who has to be bare-chested for reasons, because, you know, that's how it is. It does definitely apply. There's some like rapey thing going on here. And then you've got this guy with a giant club. You guys don't see what it says culture. If you remember Otto von Bismarck and culture comedies are oppressing people in the government. That's sort of each over the head. These barbarians like, you can keep this from happening. You strong American Indian. Meanwhile, you've got on this side a German piece. And this is like making fun of Britain. Basically by showing it as this monstrous character. It's like Britain doesn't care about, you know, what's going on in Europe. They don't really care about Belgium. They don't care about anything. What they want to do is they want to control the world. They are a world conquering power, and they won't be satisfied that they control all of the world. And so you've got the only one who can stop them, the symbol of Germany. You know, this royal crown of the Holy Roman Empire upon its head. It's the last hope for Europe kind of mentality, which, you know, to some extent there is some truth to. You know, Britain was a world power, and they kind of were trying to conquer a whole lot of stuff, so it's not exactly untrue. But you know, again, propaganda was effective for trying to keep up the home front. I don't know if you guys noticed how many of them said buy war bonds. You guys know what the war bonds are? Okay, so basically, what pays for the military? Right, taxes. Now, here's what a bond is. A bond is something you buy from the government that is essentially a governmental IOU. You buy it, you hang on to it, and eventually you can cash it in for money. Now, the idea is most of the time you're buying bonds, it's so that you can invest. And after a certain period of time, you sell back the bond, it actually is worth more than when you bought it. So it's sort of a type of investment. It's basically buying into a sense of security and trust in the government. Whenever you hear, for instance, that China, or now recently Japan, has a significant amount of the U.S. debt, that's what they're talking about, is that they've bought lots of bonds. But it's not so much like, you know, hey, they're buying debt money as much as they are investing. So it's kind of a two point to that. Well, this brings us also to the next point, which is a total war. What these signs are encouraging you to do is to participate in the war effort even if you are not directly fighting. It's literally loaning the government money, because the government needs a crap load of money if it is going to afford the necessary payments for hiring troops and buying weapons and everything else that needs to fight the war effort. So a total war is a war where we take all of our efforts, our entire effort of an entire country, all of our economic power, and put it towards the war effort. Great example of this, and I know I've told you this example before, but I'll tell it to you again. What percentage roughly does the United States spend on our military? Percentage of our GDP. So take every single dollar that we make in this country, what percentage of that goes to the military? Any ideas? It's around 13%. 13. Okay. Now let's think of size of our military for just a second. Now I don't know numbers for Army, Air Force, Navy, things like that, but I can talk to you guys about the biggest modern weapon, which is the aircraft carrier. The aircraft carrier is like a mobile fortress. It's like a little city in and of itself. You know, employing thousands of people. They are just giant things, and they are how we project power. You know, we talk about being able to drop bombs into the country, things like that. You got to have an aircraft carrier to make that happen. So how many do we have? Okay. Well, if you take our aircraft carriers and compare them to the other navies around the world, right? If you take every navy that the world has, so basically every navy that isn't the U.S., and combine them, that is 1/4 of the size of our navy. So our navy is 4 times larger than every other navy in the world combined. by number of aircraft carriers.
Where did you read that?
That is, last time I saw that it was from the U.S. Naval newspaper, I forget what it's called. That's fact. We have a gigantic army, biggest, most powerful in the world, hands down. No one would really make that. They know numbers. Now, that's at 13% of our GDP. What if we amp that up to 50% of our GDP? Well, what if we did 100%? See what I'm saying? That's total war. That's where we stop making cars. We stop making televisions. We stop producing snack foods. Whatever we make in this country, we stop. And all we make is weapons. Every single person is in the army. Every single... Even we just go guys. We'll just say every guy from the age of 16 to 48. You're now in the army. Congratulations. Let's go take somewhere over. How much power can we project then? Because that's exactly what happened in World War II. Only it's not just the U.S. Oh, in World War I as well, excuse me. It is every country involved. This is Britain, this is France, this is Germany, this is Russia. Everybody's doing that. We're just leveling everything we have at each other. That's total war. This is the first example of a total war. You can see this by the selling of bonds. We can see this through the draft. We can see this through the usage of propaganda. You know? All these things contribute to this idea of total war. And it's going to be devastating when it comes to the level of destruction we're levying at each other. You know, that's the effects of a total war. It's a cultural war as well. It's our ideology versus another ideology. Now, what's weird is that Russia wasn't really that different from the rest of Europe, but we had to exaggerate the differences to try to make them into an enemy. The other important point of propaganda is to demonize the enemy and legitimize the use of violence. If you think about it, most of us are not really okay with violence. You know, we're not okay with killing people. I mean, maybe on an abstract, like, okay, I can see this is necessary, i.e. police shooting, things like that. If I were to hand you a gun and say, kill that person, most of us, no, right? Most of us would be unwilling to engage in conflict. So I have to change your mind if I'm going to make you into a soldier. Because no soldier is born a killer. That doesn't happen. The military, and most of us are really even uncomfortable with saying that what soldiers do is kill, but that's what they do. I've heard Mr. Household tell me one time when I was in the Army, my job was to kill people. That's what they do. That's what fighting is. But we have to wrap our head in a different mindset of this, otherwise we face cognitive dissonance. How do we make this violence justifiable if we spend our entire lives hearing about how it is immoral? The answer is propaganda. You're not actually killing people. You're just destroying the enemy. You're not actually hurting anyone who's even real. Like they're Huns. They're barbarians. They're not even really like people. They're like these people, like thing like that. Basically, usage of racism. You know, you can see this for people who came back from Vietnam, who came back from World War II. How racist they are about people from other countries. Hell, Germany today has a really big problem with sort of self-identification. Because take this, for instance, going through World War II, for instance. Not everybody who was in the military was a Nazi. In fact, the vast majority of German soldiers weren't Nazis. They were just guys drafted to defend their country, just like Americans were. They fought and died, and those who survived came back and can never talk about it. The amount of public shaming for being part of that era is just unbelievable. In Germany, there's also this big thing about feeling pride. Like, you'll see people, for instance, waving the flag and chanting USA, you know, at 4th of July parades or the Olympics, things like that. They don't really do that in Germany because there's this big level of discomfort that if we get too happy about Germany, the rest of Europe's going to be like, Nazis were happy about Germany, you're a Nazi. And to be perfectly honest, that's, you know, it's a legitimate feeling because we too tend to look at Germans like that. So people go to Germany and they're like, oh yeah, what about the Holocaust? They don't want to talk about it. It's not that they're denying that it happened. It's just that they're tired of, that's the only bit of German history people actually know. You know, imagine going to Germany and being like, you know, yeah, I was kind of interested about hearing about, you know, the Hohenstaufen, like the, you know, the old kings of the Holy Roman Empire. Oh, there's a castle, that's a castle, you know. St. Pete's, yes. This is just, again, one of these types of things that propaganda is very, very, very effective in making us think about a group of people in a very specific manner. No, I was reading something today about slavery, that allegedly there was a psychologist around the 1700s who proposed this madness that slaves were driven with, that they're going crazy, they want to escape and be free. They're just obsessed with freedom. They're clearly not right in the head. This is a psychologist, not because, you know, the slaves don't really want freedom. This is just a psychosis that they might have. That sort of cognitive dissonance that can happen as people find their worldviews challenged by reason, and it's sort of like mental acrobatics they have to put themselves through to legitimize these illegitimate actions, you know. It's part of the whole war effort when it comes to engaging in total war. We have to change people's minds this way. Another great example is look at how Arabs were treated after 9/11. A friend of mine's a doctor. He told me a story about how whenever he was in this program U of L had for doctors to go and do missionary work around the world. He was actually, I think he was going to Guatemala to fix left palates or something like that. And so he goes into airport security. This friend of mine, though, he's Lebanese, so he's very Arab. And gets in the metal detector and starts going off like crazy. And they open up his bag, it's a medical bag. So what's inside of it? Well, there's bone saws and scalpels and all kinds of sharp things. He's like, oh no. And he's just like, what's going to happen? And he got through because there was another doctor who was the head of the church. Like, this is my bag. This is, you know, we're all part of the medical thing. I show all this paperwork and nonsense. And he got it through. It was just like, just the fact that he was Arab and had medical fields was like, you know, and all kinds of shenanigans, you know. This is how we react whenever we have to get into a fight. We demonize the enemy, and afterwards it's kind of like, right, now we're friends. What? You know, especially imagine guys like, I remember seeing in Murray State, they had when I was doing the Government Scholar Program down there, we did this history tour of the cemetery, basically. We were looking at different graves and kind of setting the stage for all the different people living in the past. And there's one guy who fought in World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. I was just like, what? This guy like saw some crazy amounts of action, right? So you gotta imagine his point of view, right? So starting World War I, all right, who are my enemies? Your enemies are, Germany. Your enemies are Austria-Hungary. Your enemies are the Ottoman Empire, and all these other different small groups. Okay, cool. World War II rolls around. All right, who are my enemies? Well, Italy. I thought Italy was our friends. That was the last war. Your enemy this time. Okay, Germany again. Okay, cool, got it. What about Turkey? No, Turkey's on our side. Okay. And Japan's our enemy too. Yes. Okay, fantastic. Next war. All right. Who are my enemies? Germany? No, Germany's our ally this time. Okay, what about Italy? Yeah, they're our ally as well. Okay. What about Japan? No, Japan's our friend too. Well, crap, who's our enemy? Well, we have Korea. Okay. So Korea? No, just the north part. Okay. And China. Wait, I thought China was our friends. No, you're enemy now. What? It's these shifting political things that are going on. You know, you got to imagine, it's got to mess people up. Especially talking about like this indoctrination. Germans are bad, very bad. Germans, no, they're good now. It's cool, it's cool. You know, you got to imagine this guy was very confused. Basically, when George becomes Prime Minister in 1916, he's going to be interesting later. We'll talk about him later. February 1st, 1917, Germany resumes unrestricted submarine warfare, and the U.S. declares war on April 6th. Now, you might remember we talked to you guys about the Zimmerman telegram, which was this note sent by Germany to Mexico saying, hey, it would be really great if you invaded the United States, but like seriously, don't tell anybody. And U.S. is like, whoa, war, you know. And this is why we jumped into the war, because the idea that Germany had was, if Mexico invades North America, we're going to fight a war with them, obviously, and we're going to get busy over here. So that would give Germany the time to finish the war in Europe, then they're going to come help Mexico, defeat the United States, and then the U.S. is going to have to give the territory it got from Mexico in the Mexican-American War back. So basically, Texas, Arizona, basically most of the Southwest, will become part of Mexico again. Okay? Except that telegram was intercepted by the British on its way to Mexico. And so the British are like, oh, America, we've got something for you to read. We're like, what? And, you know, this is how it went down. Except, here's something that's kind of interesting, right? So this is irrefutable. The Zimmerman telegram is one of the main reasons we got the war. However, did Germany actually write it? This is an interesting what-if scenario. I'm not saying this is true. This is a little bit, aliens, kind of paranoia type stuff, but I read an article I thought was really fascinating, so I was going to tell you about it. So here's the thing, is there were 3 telegraph lines connecting Europe to the mainland United States, right? Of those 3, all of them were cut except for one. So basically 2 were cut, 1 was still around. That one that was still around was the one through Great Britain. So in order for Germany to send a telegram, they had to send it through Great Britain. And Great Britain happened to intercept it. So if you're going to send a telegram that incriminates your entire country in getting another guy into war, which, by the way, Britain was screwed at this point. Britain was being attacked by Germany. France was buckling and folding. Russia, we'll get to them here in a second, February 1970, they ended up going to revolution. They pull out of the war entirely. So basically, Germany's army was split in half. Half was fighting the French and English, the other half was fighting Russia. Russia's gone now, so that half that was fighting Russia is now coming back to fight against England and France. And by the way, that one half of their army that was fighting England and France was enough to stay even with them. It's like fighting one dude with one hand, or it's like arm wrestling one dude with one hand, and then 2 other dudes with the other hand, and you're like holding them both, right? And then this guy passes out, so you can now take this hand and just go and crush him. Yes. So Britain was desperate. They needed America. They needed us in the war. So this telegram just happens to show up that incriminates Germany. It's going to anger a lot of Americans, and we join the war. So there's this theory that Britain actually created this, and hey, look what we found. And it was enough of a convincing argument, because basically a good chunk of Americans wanted in the war anyways. There was another half or so that were like, no, dude, we don't want to be in a war. And when this came out, we're like, well, let's go. So this is kind of an interesting what-if scenario. Again, Germany said, well, we never sent that telegram, but wouldn't they if they did? We don't know. So this is kind of interesting. What if it was made up? And we kind of went and punched a dude because of a mistake, and created World War II. Yes. All right. So as I stated, Germany gets rid of unrestricted submarine warfare, and then we join the war because of the Zimmerman telegrams. And then Britain begins using convoys. Now, convoys are basically safety in numbers. It's all these ships that are going to work together. And it makes using submarines very hard, because if you attack a ship and it's alone, no one's around to detect you. If there's a whole bunch of ships and you try to sink one, though, suddenly you've just given your position away, and all the other ships are very angry looking for you. So it negates the effectiveness of submarines. But as I said, the Russians undergo a revolution in February 1917. Basically what had happened is the war was incredibly straining on the Russian people. Lots of people dying. There was a lot of problems in terms of the economy. And the Tsar and his family were incredibly unpopular. What ends up happening is the Germans end up helping a guy named Vladimir Lenin escape from his exile and get into a position where he could start preaching his message of equality for all and the communist system, and ends up sparking a revolution. With the revolution going underway, Russia basically withdraws from the war, and again, this has this effect. So now we have the U.S. involved in the war, and it's U.S., Great Britain, France against the Germans in the Western Front. Basically, this giant shoving match that's going to happen in 1917, 1918. The skies above Europe end up filling with aircraft. I believe it's late November. It's either November or September. I can't remember which month it is. That there was more aerial dogfighting, more aerial combat than any other time in the war. And it's basically very crowded, and you get the sense of it. But July 17, 1917, George V the King of England ends up changing his name to Windsor. That's significant because the name he had before was actually German. So basically he was, again, part of his propaganda, separating himself from his German identity and further kind of solidifying that this war is on. It's on like Donkey Kong. All right, last slide, and then we're done. Isn't that exciting?
Yeah.
For the first part of the war. This is a convoy, and again, you get the sense it's just safety in numbers. You know, it's the same policy you guys should use whenever you're out and about, you know, going to concerts or thunder or whatever else you're doing. You know, in case there's 50 people. But you know. Any questions about any of this? So our major points here on the left-hand side. There's major parts of World War II, haven't gotten there yet. Establishing a new age of international politics, haven't gotten there yet. Technological innovation, the machine gun, dreadnoughts, submarines, also airplanes, we talked about those, tanks, all kinds of stuff. In fact, there are some who would argue this is the first modern war. Of course, the problem is that gets bandied around a lot. The first modern war, what does modern mean? So it's kind of up to debate, but nevertheless, those are definitely a contribution. And it's the first total war. We have used of bonds and to try to get everyone involved in the war. And I'm talking like everybody. And it affects everybody's lifestyle. We're going to get into more detail about this later, but one of the things that the government had to do was try to restrict the amount of natural resources being consumed by civilians. So, for instance, civilians could only buy so much gasoline per month. They can only buy so much butter, so much flour, so much chickens, whatever. You know, it's all these different types of things. People had to try to remain self-sufficient. And there was all kinds of crazy little strategies people utilized to do things like we wouldn't even think of. For instance, using different types of foodstuffs. Spam is actually invented, I believe it's in World War I, it might be World War II, but I think it's World War I, as a means of utilizing more efficient parts of the animal. Contrary to popular belief, Spam does not actually have, like, you know, really gross stuff in it. It's just meat. It's heavily processed, and it's preserved to such a degree that it's, you know, lasts for freaking ever. It's actually, believe it or not, Spam is actually very healthy for you. It's weird. Like, if you look at all the stuff in it, it's not really bad for you at all. It's there's all kinds of places that Spam is enjoyed. Not really as a delicacy, but it's like people are all about it. Hawaii is one of the things right around in America, but there's other places around the world, and it's, you know, like I said, it's actually very, very good. It's just our tastes aren't particularly suited to it. But I tell you what, there's some crazy nonsense that was popular in the 1940s that if you look at food-wise, you just be like disgusted. Actually, I remember reading an article in this blog where they took 10 1940s recipes and made them all and tried to see how good they were. And one of the things you see a lot of is a lot of gelatin. Like, not just Jell-O, but like gelatin, like unflavored gelatin made stuff. And they would make this stuff, they'd suspend like various bits and things in it, and then they would mold it into fun shapes. Like, I remember this one recipe that it was like tuna, lima beans, and gelatin. And like, not lima beans, peas. And like maybe one other type of flavor thing. And then like they mashed it all together, and then they put gelatin in it, and then they made it in the shape of a fish. And they would eat this. And like the funny thing is, the guy would prepare these and he would eat them, and like he would rate them. And most of them were like, "This is revolting. How did anybody eat this?" That one was like, "This is actually surprisingly good. Like, I would totally eat this." So, you know, just kind of like, yeah. But it's all about, you know, efficiency. And the thing is that if you didn't have a particular item, if you ran out of coupons for that particular item, you weren't going to get it for a month. So you had to be cautious. One thing people started doing is they started growing more and more gardens, trying to be efficient, live off the land, that sort of thing. And basically become very, very prudent people. What's kind of interesting is you see like people who lived through these different eras, and like folks living during World War I, after the fact they tend to live very frugally for the most part, but would spoil their kids. And then their kids would be like really crazy and spend a lot of money and stuff like that, and the economy collapses. But it's just kind of interesting to see how that whole thing works. But we'll talk about more like that when we get to 1920s and stuff like that. All right, that's it for today, guys. Yeah. Yeah, please.